Hello, hello. Good morning,
Welcome.
afternoon, evening, everybody. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. I'm Jenny. I'll be leading the session today. I'm going to drop a prompt in the chat for us. So as you're arriving, if you could share in the chat where you are located and what's one of the most memorable events you've been to in the past few years and why. So thinking about something you might have either you hosted, you attended, could be something you convened or just went to, could be a concert, a wedding, a party, a movie. Hello, hello. We have new folks joining. Can you hear me okay? Hopefully volume is all right. All right, excellent. Cool. Again, I'm Jenny. If you're just arriving, I will place this prompt in the chat again. We'd just love to hear where you are coming from today and one of the most memorable events you've been to in the past few years and why, what made it memorable. We've got Claire joining from Edinburgh. Exciting. I know we're going to have a mix of folks from Europe and the States, and I'm sure beyond. Andreas, based in Berlin, attended a Turkish celebration recently. It was so fun with so much dancing. Beautiful. Got Joanna coming from Portugal, more Portugal from the Netherlands. Beautiful. I'm coming to you from California. Halima's coming from New York. Great. And if you can, think about an event you've been to recently that was meaningful, memorable, and what made it that way. Vanya in Germany, one of those memorable events was a movement and improv dancing event. Nice. Anna Maria, hello, good to see you. In San Francisco, sister's wedding. It was during a later stage pandemic, and I was the only family member of hers who could attend in person. Beautiful. You ran a Google Meet for the rest of the family, joining virtually. Nice. Barbara in Berlin, dancing workshop. Invocation of where the contact improv movement came out of and how it unfolded over the past 50 years. Yeah, beautiful. And Ashley from Denver, Mikaron from Bozeman. Willie Nelson's 90th birthday in LA. Wow, that has got to be quite a celebration. Claire, massive Strictly Come Dancing fan. Other versions around the world. Saw a pro tour last month and it was incredible. Yes. Guillaume from Barcelona attended an improv course and it was really eye-opening. Yeah, so thinking about, as we're starting to do this experience design accelerator, thinking about what are the events that you might be creating and how those are going to be memorable and meaningful and impactful for your participants. Elaine, I'm just seeing your post. It's coming directly to me. In New York, facilitated a business retreat in a rural Virginia at a factory that produces equipment for agriculture. It was great to see exactly where a group member works. So doing things on site can be really impactful. Beautiful. I just recently saw, some of you might be familiar with Jacob Collier. He's like a musical phenom out of the UK. He was touring in the States and he does a lot of, I'll pause the music here. He does a lot of improvisational, he turns the audience into an improvisational choir and it is absolutely unbelievable. If you haven't seen it, you can look him up, Jacob Collier, and he's like in his 20s and he's just a genius. It's really, really beautiful. And I sang so much that night. It just opened my voice. I noticed myself singing a lot more after that. From Andrea said, an event in 1440 in California was amazing, mostly because the environment is so lovely. Yes, that's like in Santa Cruz area. It's so beautiful there. So thank you all for your contributions. I'm going to pass it over to Valeria now for your official welcome, and then we'll dive right in.
Thank you, Jenny. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our ThoughtLab session. This session is recorded and later on will be shared in the community channels. I will be your co-host for today. And for those who are not aware of the ThoughtLab concept, it's the virtual sessions where a host bring a piece of experience or research or lessons learned from the learning L&D live and share it with the community. So, and as you already know, our host for today is Jenny, and I'm very happy to see you all today and to hear what Jenny will share with all of us. A few words about Jenny, who doesn't know her. She's based in California, designed and facilitated programs for such companies as Airbnb, Google, Genentech. Jenny trains leaders on the frameworks she has developed over the 25 years. She also facilitating for 100,000 people through Scaling Intimacy School of Experience Design. And the cherry on the top, Jenny has been featured in New York Times, Forbes, Inc., and as well as the book Tools for Titans by Tim Ferriss. Jenny, no more delays. The floor is yours.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Valeria. And thanks for having me from L&D Shakers. I'm excited to connect with a lot of new faces here, some folks that I know, and a lot of new people to meet. So thank you all for taking time out of your day to be here. Hopefully we deliver a really powerful 90-minute session. That is the goal. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to dive right into our Experience Design Accelerator. So hopefully you're going to walk away with some new tools and skills to refresh your skill set as experience designers. So just a couple things as we're here together on Zoom, just invite you to be on mute and in gallery view when we're all together. We'll reduce background noise, and you can see all the beautiful faces by dragging your screen to make the gallery bigger while slides are running if you like. I invite you to chat it up so you can place your thoughts, questions, and suggestions in the chat. I do my best to keep an eye on it and monitor it and respond. It's not only a place for you to connect with me, but for you to connect with each other. So also feel free to just have those sidebar conversations ongoingly in the chat. And if the chat stream overwhelms you, just ignore it. You'll get everything you need from my voice and the screen. Cameos and self-care are totally welcome. So anyone who comes through your background is totally cool. Feel free to move around, use the restroom, eat and drink as you need. We're going to go through the 90 minutes without an official break. And I encourage you to use reactions and emojis. This is a great nonverbal way that we can celebrate shares and what other people are contributing as well. So that's that. 3 ways to be here. I like to talk about these as mindsets to help you get the most out of the experience. So one way you might show up here is as a consumer, and that would be to kind of passively let the content wash over you and wait for the 90 minutes to be over. The other way you might show up is as a critic, feeling pessimistic, feeling like, oh, this is not going to work, or I already know all of this. Like, why am I here? This is maybe not a good use of my time. Another way that you might want to show up here is as a contributor. And this is the way we want to invite you to step in today. So this is where you both glass is half full and glass is half empty. So glass is half full. You're bringing all your wisdom, all your lifetime of experience to the table. And glass half empty, you're also willing to learn something new, both from me and the other people who are on this call, who you might be interacting with today. And so we really invite you to shift from maybe being a passive observer to really an active contributor, active participant, sharing in the chat, sharing in your breakouts, so that we can all learn together as we go through this content today. So if you are willing to be a contributor, can you give me a physical thumbs up in your screen so I can see you just for this 90 minutes? I imagine you are all probably pretty active contributors in your lives, but glass half full will be contributors. Thank you so much for that. So now we are all here as contributors. What's coming today, just a little agenda. In 90 minutes, we're going to learn by doing. You're going to experience the scaling intimacy frameworks in action. So I'm going to talk to you about the frameworks, but you're also going to see them in action. At the very end, I'll reverse engineer the session to show you how we applied the frameworks to the design of this session. So we're going to cover what experience design is. What do we mean by that term? The 3 pillars of designing dynamic experiences. We're going to go over the main framework that we use to design events, which we call the dramatic arc event template. And we're going to have opportunities to connect with this inspiring community. And you'll receive access to a whole slew of follow-up resources, which I'll share with you at the end, that are all free. So before we get into our first breakout, I'd love to hear from you in the chat. What kind of events are you designing and leading, and for whom? So if you can describe it in a phrase, something short like, I lead leadership development programs within my company for managers, or I lead retreats for coaches who want to expand their business, whatever that is. So just think about what kind of events you are designing and leading. Is there a specific topic? Is there a specific audience that you design and deliver for? So just, I want to get a better sense of who's in the room and what you're up to. And hopefully that will help me cater this session even a little bit more to what you are doing, whether you're internal at an organization or you're an external person who serves internal audiences or your own audience, right? Some of you might be content creators and thought leaders as well. So I'm seeing leadership program for managers. So I got that one right. Design learning for consultants, leaders enablement program in a tech company, sales enablement, technical training, internal growth workshops for my organization, leadership development, a lot of leadership development in this group, and manager programs, early career workshops, various L&D workshops for managers and ICs within an org. I lead onboarding and ongoing development. I love onboarding, such a beautiful opportunity to create connection and culture. Guiding teams and leaders through effectiveness work, internal audiences, managers, diversity and communication workshops, nonprofits, C-suite leaders, manufacturing, great. How to design events with embodiment methods for organizations. That's a great edge to be playing with, I think. L&D for different roles in a banking company, great. Team events fostering relationships, well-being sessions, bleeding edge design agencies, great. Mostly onboarding, great. So we've got a couple onboarding folks, a lot of people doing leadership development. That's really helpful, thank you. So now I have a better sense of what we are doing as we are in the room together. So I'm going to keep going here on our slides, and we're going to jump into our first breakout here together. This is an exercise, very classic one. You may be familiar with it. It's called Rose, Thorn, Bud. And I think when I mentioned it to Valeria, she was like, oh, you do it like, it's like this one. And I was like, oh no, I'm doing it like this. And what's beautiful about it is just, it's a very simple framework, but you can reinterpret it 1,000 ways depending on your context and your audience. So today we're going to be heading into breakouts in a moment of 2, and you're going to have 2 minutes each, 5 minutes total. So that first minute of the breakout is just to arrive and say hello. And then each person will have 2 minutes to share all 3 aspects of this metaphor, the rose, the thorn, and the bud, while the other partner is listening with acceptance and support. So the other partner is not interjecting or asking questions, but you just really want to be there as an active listener. So the rose is something beautiful that's in full bloom for you as an experienced designer. This could be one of your superpowers or natural gifts. So you could say like, oh, I feel really happy with the way that, I'm designing programs that feel really balanced. I'm bringing in all these different modalities and it feels like you're really stimulating the full human experience. Or I'm really great at creating welcoming environments that create psychological safety for people to really drop in and feel connected, right? So you can talk about something like that, something that's going really well for you or something that you feel really happy about in your own practice. Your thorn is a challenge or an obstacle that you're facing as an experienced designer. Maybe you feel like your audience is really skeptical and you have to spend the first half an hour of your program just getting them bought into why they should be participating. And it's a mandatory training and there's a lot of resistance. Or maybe you're working as freelance and you're really trying to get more business because you really want to make this a full-time thing. Right now it's a part-time thing. So whatever obstacle or challenge is up for you. And your bud is something that you're excited to learn about during this session. So maybe there's something specific that you came here for. So just sharing that with your partner as well. The person who woke up earliest this morning is going to share first. So you'll have to figure that out when you get into your session. And you'll have the first minute, as I said, to drop in and say hello with your partners. And I'm going to place the instructions in the chat for you in case you forgot what your rose is, your thorn is, and your bud. So we will be sending you into breakouts in just a moment, but maybe just take a breath now to think about, what is a rose? Something I feel really good about in my experience design practice. A thorn, something that is a challenge for me right now, something I'm struggling with, an obstacle, something I haven't figured out quite yet. And a bud, something that you're excited about in this session, something that you're hoping to learn today. So with that, we are going to open our breakouts and you'll see an announcement of when to switch partners. So I just encourage you to accept non-closure, which means you might not be done at the end of your 2 minutes, but we do want to make space for the other person to talk. and to have equal voice. So if there's 2 of you in the breakout room, you're listening half the time and speaking half the time, and we'll do our best to help you manage that with those breakout announcements. So with no further ado, we'll send you into your breakout so you can share your rose, thorn, and bud about your experience as an experience designer. So see you back here in 5 minutes.
Joanna, Jordan, let us know.
Yes. All right. We got some folks back in the room, some folks still sharing in their breakouts. All right. Here they come. Excellent. Welcome back. Welcome back. Hopefully you all got a chance to share about your rose, your thorn, and your bud. Now as we're back in the main room, I would just love to hear from folks in the chat. If you would be willing to share in the chat, what's a thorn? Maybe it's useful for me to hear a struggle or a challenge you're facing, because again, I can try to address that as much as possible while we go through the content today. So if you'd be willing to drop into the chat any of the thorns, the challenges, the obstacles that you're trying to overcome, even if you can just describe that in a real, just a short phrase there, that will help me cater this session to you. So this is a moment to drop your thorn into the chat. I imagine that some of you maybe had similar thorns. It's useful for us to all see also as a community kind of what we're going through individually and collectively, because there's oftentimes a lot of overlapping themes. And for those of you that just arrived during that breakout, we were doing rose, thorn, and bud, something, one of our strengths, one of our challenges, and something we're excited to learn today. So that metaphor there. From Barbara, translating why this topic is important when it's not directly linked to profit to leaders. Yes. Challenge was around scaling and doing more experiences. Yes, so definitely what we're talking about today should support you with scaling. Time to dedicate to my own development, skills, need building. So you're here, so that's great, that you'll definitely build skills. Similar thorns as you just started working for new companies. Engagement. Yeah, engagement's so huge. One of the big things, and we'd say in my body work, is try to insert an element of engagement every 5 minutes, which sounds like a lot, but it can just be a quick, like, raise your hand if you, or drop in the chat, or has anyone experienced, just those little micro moments do add up in a really big way. Dealing with learning preferences, moving from execution mode to long-term strategy, finding our next role, experimenting and knowing how I handle challenging humans in a new way. There's always challenging humans, right? Never formally been trained. Yeah, so you want to level up. Excellent. Experimenting with new content. Yeah, because we get used to doing things the way we've done them. And as Guillaume was saying, like the way that we know it works, especially when you're delivering content in a high stakes situation, right? You want to make sure it hits. So sometimes we tend to stay in the places that we're most comfortable. So hopefully today you'll get some new tools, some new frameworks that you can play with and add to your skill set. So I'd love to talk for a moment about what we mean by experience design, right? So this might seem obvious, like, oh, experience design, but I often find that people, when they talk about experience design, especially if they're not familiar with what experience design is, it gets kind of confused with the UX UI world. Like, is this human to technology? And I always like to say this is a human to human experience. And I think that a little bit helps to clarify. But I'd love to see in the chat again, how you define experience design. So I'd love you to fill in this sentence, experience design is, and see if you can answer that in one sentence and drop it in the chat. So that, again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. It's just to get a pulse, a sense from this group of how you're interpreting experience design, how you think of it, how you approach it. So it's not necessarily the generic definition of experience design, but it's what experience design is to you. So would love to have you finish that sentence and drop it in the chat, and we'll get to see kind of what everyone's thinking about regarding what experience design is. What do we mean when we use that term? So I'll just let some of those pop into the chat as you're thinking and writing. I always love reading these because I learn. I learn from you all in these moments. All right, facilitating community in a safe environment, creating a transformational opportunity that inspires and connects people. I love that. The consequence of meaningful interactions, beautiful. A unique way of elevating someone's complete awareness of the moment. Ooh, that's inspiring. Focus on interaction and following what each moment needs and how it is unfolding. Beautiful. So really in that spontaneous, emergent space, right? Like you can plan for an event, and we always know that whatever you plan and what happens in the room, two different things, right? It never goes exactly according to plan. Creating an environment to connect, learn, and listen. Beautiful. Designing a welcoming and safe environment for folks to learn best in. Holistic picture of where learning happens. Yeah. So much about learning, creating an environment, creating a space, creating a container, tailoring the learning space to the specifics of the group, meaningful learning that sticks. Yeah, I mean, I think we are all of us on the same page here. We want to create meaningful learning experiences. We want to create connection. We want to create inspiration. So I love these. These are really beautiful and inspiring. I love hearing all of them. Thank you for sharing those. I want to share with you our definition of experience design that we use as our working definition at Scaling Intimacy. So we like to say that experience design is the empathetic and strategic process, and we'll break these words down, of creating transformational experiences built on meaningful connections and collaborative learning. So we're going to now take a little bit of a deeper dive into what all of those words mean. So we talk about experience design. Design we think of as the map. It's the territory. It's the plan, the agenda, right, of the vision of what you're going to be doing. And the way you develop that vision or agenda is both strategic and empathetic. The strategic part is reverse engineering your curriculum, starting from your goals and outcomes, right? So you want to start from the end and work your way backwards. That's very much from your mind, right? You're intellectualizing, strategizing. But there's also this empathetic piece in experience design, which is considering what the experience will feel like from the participant's perspective, right? So really putting yourself in their shoes and imagining what this will feel like for them when you deliver it. And then on the other piece of the design is the experience. It's the journey. It's what actually happens in the room. It's how people traverse. You should hopefully be able to view slides. It might be in your tabs. I know if you've upgraded to Zoom recently, there's like a tabs situation. And yes, happy to share slides with you after. There's 3 pillars to the experience. The first one is transformation, and by that we mean change or impact, right? So your audience might be allergic to the word transformation or might be really into the word transformation. Another way to say that is we want to create change or impact. So if people walk in and out of your session the same, we haven't done our job. So we want to think about how we can fundamentally change, transform the way they think, feel, act, or do. Then there's connection. We want to really build a culture of belonging, create psychological safety so that people are dropped in and can do their best work. And then also we want to create environments of collaborative learning. And this is really harnessing the wisdom in the room. So we just did some collaborative learning by sharing our definitions of what experience design is. So that would be an example of collaborative learning. We're learning with and from each other. So let's dive in a little bit more to those 3 pillars of designing dynamic experiences. This is what underlays our whole approach to experience design. So again, pillar 1, transformation, impact, or change. People should walk out fundamentally different than they walked in if we want to create lasting learning experiences. So want to go over for a moment these learning zones for easeful transformation. Can you raise your hand if you have seen this model before? Many of us may be familiar. Some are, some are not. Okay, great. So I see some hands raised. Thank you. So comfort zone. I'll pass it to you all because you all are bright and beautiful. Anyone who would be willing to come off mute and explain to us your understanding of comfort zone, stretch zone, panic zone. And I'm happy to just have anybody pop off mute so you can self-select and just share with us what your impression is of these 3 learning zones. Brave souls, brave souls.
I can do it if nobody wants to.
Go, Romy.
Okay, so I always like to say that, We often start in our comfort zone. It just feels good and great where we want to meet people at. But if we stay there, then no learning happens. So, and then on the opposite side, we have the panic zone where if we go too far and we step way too much out of our comfort zone, we go in panic and fight, freeze response, and no learning happens there either. So we want to aim for that nice sweet spot, the stretch zone. Sometimes I call it the challenge zone or the learning zone, where basically it's where the learning happens, where, yeah, it can be uncomfortable at times, but people feel called to try new things, step out of their comfort zone, and learn and grow and transform more.
Beautiful. Thanks, Romy. And in full transparency, Romy and I work very closely together. She's a facilitator at Scaling Intimacy. So she's not a plant exactly, but she's definitely familiar with this work and teaches and leads work of her own. That's really wonderful. So thank you, Romy, for being here. So this is around, easeful, gradual transformation. So some people will use the technique of pushing people into their panic zone. I find that is a technique, but it causes a lot of chaos and a lot of extra work for you and for the participants. So you want to be really skillful if you do that. I prefer to slowly, gradually guide people into transformation. And we do that by meeting people in their comfort zone. So establishing that trust, rapport, connection early on, and then slowly and gradually pulling them into their stretch zone. So I imagine it like a rubber band. When you first come in, that rubber band is flaccid, it's comfortable, it's easeful, there's no stretch needed. And then you're slowly pulling without popping that rubber band in the panic zone, right? And for each group, where that sweet spot is of panic versus stretch is something that we need to navigate and figure out as we go. So just thinking about transformation, this is our approach to transformation. Again, meeting people in their comfort zone, slowly getting them into their stretch zone, expanding that stretch zone as much as you can without taking people into their panic zone. Pillar 2 is connection. This is create a culture of belonging. And we have 3 keys to connection that we like to share. And these are strategies to strengthen relationships, create community, and build culture. So oftentimes connection is this like touchy-feely soft skill that seems like some people can do and some people can't, but really anyone can guide groups to a state of connection if you have these strategies and mindsets in place. So the first one is to connect early. And so this is really about that fact that the beginning sets the tone for everything to come, right? So if you jump on this line like you did, and we had started with like no chat and it was a webinar and there were slides running and a countdown clock, it wouldn't feel very personal. You wouldn't necessarily feel very connected, but instead there's an opening prompt, there's music, it's gallery, we're seeing each other, we're already connecting right from the very start. So one way you can do that is, again, share an opening prompt. And we also really encourage you to do an icebreaker, some kind of facilitated breakout share in the first 10 minutes. So if you want people to share, if you want them to feel connected, doing that as early on as possible is really going to set the tone that connection is a priority and that relationships matter. We also suggest our second key is to connect often. So that's really about weaving a web of connection throughout your learning experience. And these don't have to be long breakouts or long moments of connection. You just want them to be frequent, right? So it's sharing in the chat, it's doing a breakout, it's having some reflection. It can be witnessing other people share, and that can be a really beautiful way to connect as well. So even just 5 minutes, as we saw early on, can make a big difference. Ideal times to weave in these aspects of connection, I find, is after content. So you can do this as a debrief, right? Maybe you just shared a topic, there was a speaker or a workshop, a concept that you shared. And so then you put people into debrief groups, have them share about what was most meaningful for them. You can do it as after a break, right? This is when you're wanting to coalesce the energy and refocus a group, and as debrief. So anytime that there's like a dip in the energy, it's a great time to put an element of connection, because one of the things we'd like to say is that connection is your most effective engagement strategy. So if you feel people dropping off, boom, get them in a state of connection, because then they're going to be awake, alive, receptive. They're going to show up for their partner more than just for themselves. I'm seeing in the chat, if it's not Zoom, but in person, would it be small breakout groups to share instead of, small groups to share instead of breakouts? Yes. Yes, I would say putting people in small groups, and I don't have it on this slide, but we suggest in that first breakout, especially groups of 2 or 3. So 1 is solo, 2 is a partnership, 3 is the smallest microcosm of community. So whenever I can and I have time to do 3s, I like to do 3s, because it just creates this feeling of like we're a group rather than just the one-on-one dichotomy. So I suggest 3s if you can, which also works really well for both your introverts and your extroverts. Third key is to gradually increase vulnerability. Yes, suggestion is same for in-person or virtual. Yeah. Gradually increase vulnerability. How many of you have had an experience where you're in a session and the facilitator asks a question that's like, whoa, I'm not ready for that. That's too much, too soon. Like a lot of people have had that, like this backfires, right? If you go too far, too fast, and it actually creates closure, and then you have to work harder to get people to open up later. So we want to avoid that. The way we avoid that is by slowly increasing the depth of sharing after establishing psychological safety, right? That's expanding that comfort zone into the stretch zone. And when we gradually increase vulnerability, it promotes bonding and empathy. So that's the way we want to think about meeting our group where they're at, and then slowly expanding that sense of vulnerability, offering layers and levels of opt-in, right? Nobody likes to feel forced to open up or to have forced fun. So doing it in a way that is inviting people to open rather than forcing them to open. So now we'd love to hear from you. We just talked about these 3 strategies: connecting early, connecting often, or gradually increasing vulnerability. Which connection strategy would most support your work and why? This is a moment that you can post in the chat, but also happy to have someone who might want to jump off mute again and share verbally with us. It's really lovely to have your voices in the room and to hear what's popping for you. So just thinking about, I'm seeing so far a lot of connecting often would maybe most support your work. This might be a place where you're growing, where you realize, oh, I could do more of that, and it would really be helpful for my work. Connecting early and often. Yeah, I think especially early, it's so tempting to want to go into logistics or announcements. And that's one of the pitfalls. Great. Is there anyone who would be willing to jump off mute and share? Sorry, I don't know why this keeps happening with my thing. And share a little bit more about why this would be important for you, or how this might show up for you in your work.
So I actually put connecting often for individual contributors and gradually increasing vulnerability for my leaders and managers. Because I think with the leaders and managers, we do connect quite often. And in these sessions, I think we maybe tend to go too fast in the beginning, and that really doesn't for a good leadership session. So I think that gradually increasing vulnerability will really foster a great environment for our managers and leaders to really learn from each other and up themselves. And then with connecting often with the individual contributors, you know, I think whenever I'm doing training sessions with them, just being able to kind of have that like pace, and also just like getting them, I mean, they've probably heard my voice a million times, and I think getting them to really kind of build that community with each other, I think I've seen where they really, that's like the best chance of them to learn and for it to really stick in their brains when they're doing that and learning from each other, and I'm just like facilitating it.
Yes, thank you. That's beautiful. I often like to think about, as experience designers and facilitators, we're the invisible architects, right? So in an ideal world, you're creating the frameworks, you're creating the frame literally, and you're inviting participants to paint the picture with you. And then at a certain point, you kind of fade out into the background, and they're the ones leading and guiding and learning and connecting and engaging and interacting, right? So it's like, if you set it up correctly, then you really start to fade way into the background, and they are in the foreground. So I love the way that you shared that. It's really great. Cool, thank you. So I'm seeing a lot of connect early, connect often, and some folks in the gradually increase. Yes, not stage on the stage. Yes, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment as well. So that's really wonderful. Thank you. So thinking about connection strategies and what will be most helpful for you. And now we're going to talk about pillar 3, which is collaborative learning and harnessing the wisdom in the room. So perfect timing for this. So we want to move from this mindset of sage on the stage, right? The person at the front of the room who has all the answers, who's doing a one-way lecture PowerPoint to an audience of like, hopefully people who are paying attention, but oftentimes not, because we know that those long lectures do not actually capture people's attention. The worst statistic is that the average adult attention span is 8 seconds. That's like the worst one of the research, but I like to use that one because I think it's compelling, obviously, for like why we need to be engaging, why we need to involve our audiences. especially in this stage and age where people's attention spans are very short. And so you're shifting. I see Andreas, your hand up, and I'll call on you in just a moment. So you're moving from stage on the stage to wisdom is in the room, right? So we want to elevate our participants to experts, right? They're learners and they're experts. They're bringing a whole lifetime of experience into the room. And I think, as some of you shared, people tend to be more engaged and excited about what's happening when they're learning from their colleagues. Some of those hands went away. Andreas, did you want to say something or ask something?
No, all good. I'm actually not quite sure why it went up.
Okay, no problem. So this is shifting our mindset, right? So you don't, the beautiful thing about this is it means you don't have to have all the answers, right? Sometimes someone asks me a question, if I'm not sure, I might be like, oh, I'm not sure about that. Anyone else in the room have, some insight on this, experience with this? It's a beautiful way that you can really invite people to step forward. So curious to hear again in the chat, and we may be able to take one or two voices. What are your favorite ways to help participants learn with and from each other and welcome more voices into the room? So how do you think about this? How do you think about engaging your participants as active contributors? How do you help people learn with and from each other? What are the ways in which you already do this or you think about doing this? So would love to hear that in the chat, and happy to also take a voice or two if anyone is willing to pop off mute. Always good to hear your voices. So I'm hearing ask more questions, ask deep questions, give people time to reflect solo before breakouts. That's also a really wonderful technique, especially for introverts who maybe need a little bit more reflection time. Going around the room to share, right? So if you democratize sharing, you make sure that every person has a turn, and that again is going to probably work better in smaller groups. Then it really just helps everyone have a chance to verbalize, setting the context in the beginning that we want to hear from the room, right? This could be in our guidelines. We talked about that being contributors, right? So you're setting expectations, sharing experiences in small groups, ask a powerful question, and then sit in silence until someone speaks up. Silence can be a very powerful tool. Breaking people into groups, have a case study or a simulation, have them work on it and present back. I love that. I often do role plays, especially when we train people in facilitation. You can talk about facilitation and get the principles, but until you're actually doing it, that's where the rubber meets the road. So we try to create these low stakes environments where people get to practice dealing with these challenging situations and getting feedback. So role plays can be really awesome. I'm sure especially those of you that do leadership development, manager trainings, probably incorporating some of those. What are you hearing from one another? Ask for examples, prompting behavior-based question. Tell me about a time when. Storytelling, really powerful. Consultancy protocols, liberating structures. Yeah, really great content and liberating structures. Think, pair, and share. Excellent. Something new for you that's being presented. Is there anything anyone would like to share coming off mute, offer a little bit more color or depth, anything that's working well for you in this arena of collaborative learning? I'll just open up the floor for anyone who would be willing to jump off mute and share any more detail about that.
I'll jump in real quick, but it's not something I've tried yet. It's just something that I'm really curious about. So I'd love to hear what you think, which is basically the tap out kind of roundtable discussion where, let's say there's 5 people and 2 people are kind of known experts, but the other 3 are just up there through their own will to participate. And at any point, someone from the audience can come tap a shoulder and join in. And so you keep this kind of flow of participation that's not, like you're saying, sage on the stage. And also just kind of, I think, invites people to have agency within the group. And it's just a surprise. I think the surprise element is what keeps it moving.
Thank you. Has anybody tried that? Yeah, I'm seeing fishbowl. Fishbowl's another way. Yeah, Romy's tried that. Any tips on that format that you might want to share if Nell was to try that? Anything to know about how to facilitate that well? Or things to look out for, pitfalls to be aware of?
I think just I like anything with facilitation, right? Make those instructions super clear so people really do understand how, because sometimes I notice if I don't make it really explicit in that fishbowl that, we want anyone to have agency, tap someone's shoulder, come in. People are really hesitant at first. So sometimes I even give them like a demo and they see or they try it out and then they feel more comfortable and that they know they can do that.
Yeah, thank you. Demos are so powerful, especially when you're doing an exercise that might be a little bit more complex, have moving pieces, have multiple contributors. actually seeing it in action, I think gives people a really good sense of what's coming. Guillaume, do you have your hand up there?
Yeah, I like to bring back what other participants shared constantly. Like that's one big role of the facilitator, right? To be
Yes.
reminding of what has been shared in the room constantly.
Yes.
Which can be challenging at times because there are those silent introvert members you mentioned, and there are those who participate a lot. So that's something to be aware of. Otherwise, we are bringing back what just one person was saying all the time.
Totally. Yes,
Yeah.
100%. So how we term what you're talking about is weaving themes, right? So it's like listening, looking for where are the commonalities popping up. And then I see as facilitators, right, a lot of our role is narrating and reflecting, right?
Yes,
like
absolutely.
repeating back what you're hearing and showing it to someone. And I think when you do that, the experience for someone is that like, oh, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel acknowledged, right? And this is one of the huge powers we have as experience designers and facilitators is acknowledging people. And I always say this thing of like, I was sharing with you all my recent experience was going to see this concert. And so many nights in the concert, and so many times in the concert, the singer was like, San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. And I always joke about the quintessential acknowledgement is when someone comes out to lead a concert and they're like, what's up, Boston? What's up, Amsterdam? And everyone goes, like, they see me, they know who I am. No, they literally said the place that they're in. And like, yeah, that's good that they remember where they are. But just that, right? Just that makes people all of a sudden feel like, yeah, they see me, they know me, they're here with me. And I think, again, weaving themes, reflecting back what you're hearing, and also the super, super simple using names, right? Just like Romy, Elaine, Guillaume, Valeria, right? Now, like just that, and that's one of the beautiful parts about the online world is you've got these digital name tags that you can use, right? All the time. And so I always say, it's like, say thank you, use people's names, acknowledge the themes and commonalities that are coming up, and you create such an environment of psychological safety in the room and a place where people want to open up. Just that, like say thank you, use people's names will change the room 100%. Okay, that's my diatribe. Elaine, what would you like to share?
I just want to add in, just at the top and throughout sessions, I always say everyone's voice is welcome in this conversation. And it's really wonderful to hear everyone's point of view because everyone adds to it. Even if someone has said something that you have heard, it's great for you to say that's what's true for you. And just like really just encourage it in a very obvious way that we want you here. We want your voice. And if you haven't spoken, that's okay, and take your time and come in when you want, you know, to not make people feel like they're on the spot, but that pacing is fine. People can pace how they like, but yeah, that's all.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, that a part of what we're talking about here is making the implicit explicit, like really saying the things that you want to happen and then creating an environment where that is more possible. So everyone's voice is welcome. Some pieces around that I would say also that are great to add is like, there's no right answer. There's no wrong answers, right? There's no right or wrong contribution. There's no right or wrong way to engage with this, right? Creating that open field. I think part of our also job as facilitators is to be neutral, right? We're not here to say this person's right, this person's wrong. I like this person, I don't like this person. This share is valid, this share is invalid. All shares are valid, right? So you want to create that generative environment. And one of the other ways I like to do that also is, again, we talked about that equal voice. So if you're in a group of 3, you're talking 1/3 of the time and you're listening 2/3 of the time. And especially if you have more of like an engineering type of audience, having that metric can be really helpful for them where they're like, oh, I get it. It's like something I can work with. Some people might be familiar with that step up, step back. That's another way of encouraging people and being like, who haven't we heard it from yet, right? I love to hear from some new voices, people that haven't shared. And one of the things that I love to do that we've been doing here is, again, some people prefer to share in the chat. Some people are happy to come off mute. So I like to give both options, right? Like put in the chat or come off mute. And that way you're welcoming your introverts and your extroverts at the same time. And the last thing I'll share on this topic and then we'll move on is thinking about, if you feel like there's that one person that's being shared or there's one common perspective that's being shared over and over again, to say who has a different perspective, who has different input, who had a different experience. Maybe you come back from a breakout and people are like, I loved it, it was great. And you're like, did anybody have a challenging time with that? Anybody feel uncomfortable there? Anybody, maybe close to panic zone in that activity? And to surface that is also really powerful. And as a facilitator, if you can hold that diversity of perspectives, again, just opens up more psychological safety, more willingness to share in the room. Okay, excellent. Let us continue. Thank you for your shares. And now let's talk about the 3 event models. So these I call the flatline, the chaos, and the dramatic arc model. The first 2 are kind of default models. The third is the dramatic arc, which is the one that we are going to be working with here today and looking at and playing with. So the flatline model, you may recognize, it is a very traditional sit and listen, stage on the stage, conference type model, right? So you have a beginning and middle and end, nothing much changes. You've got speaker panel, speaker lunch, speaker fireside chat, woo, and speaker end, right? It's a lot of content. There's no time for connection. There's no time for debriefing or interaction, assimilation, kind of digestion of content. And so what happens when you get into this flatline model is it often leaves people feeling bored, disengaged, and overwhelmed, right? That's when you've got people sitting in the back row on their phones, checking email, watching panda videos on YouTube. It's like not happening, right? Yeah, oversaturated. 100 people are overwhelmed. It's just too much, right? You can't take it in at a certain point. And so this is what a lot of conferences are doing. Yes, the pandas are so cute, but this is not the time to be watching pandas, right? So this is just, again, very traditional. It's a default model that a lot of events fall into. A lot of offsites might fall into this as well, where it's just presentation after presentation after presentation. At a certain point, people just tune out and they disengage. So we don't want to do this one. Another one that you may see is the chaos model. It's all over the place. You're like, what were these people thinking? Like, it's disorganized. The breaks are uneven. The speakers are saying contradictory information. Like, the timing's all awkward. And there's no through line. There's no continuity. There's no story. There's no arc. There's no journey. And this is often leaves people feeling confused and frustrated, right? They're like, what is going on? Why am I here? Examples of this often happen, let's say, when people have a speaker, like a keynote speaker that they're bringing in, and they'd really like to have that keynote speaker after lunch, but that person's only available at 11 a.m. And so they have to insert this person. It really doesn't make sense in the program at that timing. They haven't done enough preparatory contextualizing for that person's share to really make sense, but that's what they have to do. Or someone arrives late and they have to move things. This is also probably more of your novice designer, someone who's still getting their feet wet or dealing with a lot of external factors. I think a lot of offsites tend to end up like this checklist of stuff that just gets thrown together. People are trying to do too much all at once. This is oftentimes when you don't have a refined purpose, a clear purpose that's seen through. So it just ends up being this like smorgasbord of things that don't relate to each other in a meaningful way. So that's often where you see chaos model. Andreas, is this a purposeful hand? No, it just keeps happening. Okay. I don't know either. All right. That's okay. I'll just keep calling on you. If it happens one time by magic, you can say anything you want. So that's sometimes chaos. Again, this is default. No one tries to do a chaos model, but sometimes it happens by mistake. So we want to avoid these two. What we do want to aim towards, what I'm going to share with you today and what we're going to play with applying, is the dramatic arc model. And this is our proprietary framework that we developed by Scaling Intimacy founder, that's me, and used by thousands of event leaders around the world. So my background before doing what I do now is in theater. That's what I have my degree in. I took a 10-year detour into the health and wellness industry. I co-founded a practice called Acro Yoga. Some of you may have heard of. It's partner acrobatics and Thai massage and yoga. So different field, but really useful about using the body as a metaphor, creating psychological safety and physical safety, and helping people work together in teams, build relationships, trust, connection very, very quickly, because you're doing physical feats of daring, where safety is really important. And so now what I did when I left Acro Yoga and I wanted to bring this kind of work into especially companies and corporations, I was like, what are the universal elements of what we're doing in our Acro Yoga programs that could be applied to any context, to any content, to any audience for any length of time? So I was really looking for universal elements. And so what I did was kind of, again, reverse engineered what this could look like. And I came up with this, basically realized that I had taken the dramatic arc from theater and storytelling and applied it to an event's context, right? So as opposed to flatline or chaos, we're looking at a dramatic arc, which looks like this. So that's the framework that we're going to be talking about and looking at today. You'll see in that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in that through line at the bottom is that transformation. This is a transformational arc. And that transformational arc we call the primary shift. The primary shift is usually a from to statement. It is a way that you're encapsulating where you are meeting your audience in the beginning. What is that from state at the beginning? And what is that to state that you want to achieve at the end? So it might be, we want to take our group from confused to clear. We want to take our group from talking about our values to living them as a daily, way that we evaluate making critical decisions in the business. So what is the starting point? What is the ending point? That is the primary shift that you're looking at. And so when you see that arc of transformation, where are we starting? Where are we ending? Then you can start to be that strategic planner and reverse engineer what the journey is. Yes, here we are. Yes, it's used for narrative writing. Yeah, the arc is, again, a very well-established tool, but in this context, we're applying it to events. So I've taught this to, again, thousands of people. I've used it for over 20 years in my own work, and I can guarantee you it works really, really well. At the top, you'll see it's not quite in the middle, but it's 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through your program, is that top of the pyramid called the pinnacle. And the pinnacle is where your promise comes to life. It is where people experience the transformation. So it's not just an idea or a concept or a keynote. It's some kind of experiential exercise where this is like, literally, we call it the point. The pinnacle is literally the point. It's why people came and they're having the experience in that moment. On our way up to the pinnacle, one of the important pieces we've talked about, guidelines, group agreements, rules of engagement, ways that you create psychological safety and culture. And on the back end, you have this period of integration, which is really all about how people are digesting and assimilating what they've learned, what it means for them, and how they'll be taking it forward. So this is a very simplified way of looking at the arc, and we're going to go through now and go into more detail. But as I go into more detail, what I imagine you may find is that you are doing a lot of these things already. The arc is actually very, very intuitive. And sometimes, a lot of times when I share this model, people are like, oh yeah, I was doing that, but I didn't have a name for it. Or I didn't necessarily know why I was doing that. So hopefully what we're going to be doing here is giving you just a little bit more context, a little bit more structure that can help make your design process faster, easier, and more impactful. Because I know for so many of us, when you're designing from scratch every time, it can be really laborious. And also you can get mixed results. So hopefully this is going to help you streamline your event design process. So I'm going to go now into a little bit more detail, and then we're going to have a chance to reflect on what the arc could give you in your experience design practice. A spiral or a circle form be used. I've had people ask me about this. I've experimented with some form of a spiral, but I find in this, I'm sure that is 100% possible. I've been using the dramatic arc for, again, like 20 years, and I just find it works really well for me and my design process. So that's what we'll be sharing today, but excited to see if you have an interpretation of an arc or a circle as well. So again, primary shift is that from to statement, and that is the statement of the intended transformation for your participants, right? Where are you meeting them at, and where are you delivering them to at the end? So we start on the bottom here at our very, very beginning, which is our arrival and our welcoming. That's setting the space and making a first impression. So whether this is virtual, people are coming onto your session, there's music, there's gallery, there's a prompt, what's happening, or it's in person where it's like transportation, parking, if you're in a car, it's greeters, who's out front, it's registration, it's name tags, right? It's music, it's food. What is happening as people arrive? What are their first impressions? Because I'm sure many of you are familiar with Priya Parker, who wrote The Art of Gathering, right? It's all about you're creating a world when you have an event. This is like a microcosm of a universe. So you get to decide what happens there. And when people walk in that room, you have an opportunity to create an alternative universe, a different world. So just being really intentional about that and thinking as soon as people walk in the room, the mind is a meaning-making machine. And so it's looking for, how does this universe operate? What is expected here? What is the tone? What is the feeling? What is the vibe? And you get to set that right from the beginning. So being really intentional there. Then one of the next elements we like to do is guidelines. We've talked about this as mindsets that help people get the most out of the experience. And you want to qualify those with behavior. So I talked about when you're being a contributor, your glass half full, glass half empty, you're bringing your wisdom, also willing to learn, you're contributing, you're putting things in the chat, you're connecting with people in breakouts, right? So I gave you some caveats of what that meant. So think about 3 to 5 rules of engagement. I find more than 5 people get a little bit lost. And this is really where you're creating psychological safety and culture. So thinking about how to help people really feel connected to the work you're going to be doing and hold that container with you. So it's not just you doing it, it's them doing it with you and with each other. So you want to be explicit, make the implicit explicit with those guidelines up front. Then we go into some kind of an icebreaker. This is a facilitated activity that promotes connection. You want to turn your audience from passive observers to active participants, especially if you have folks who are resistant, skeptical, people who don't have their videos on virtual. When you send them into an icebreaker, again, connection is your most effective engagement strategy. This is going to get people really in, right? It helps them cross a threshold. And probably for most people might bring them into somewhat of a stretch zone. So you want to have that connect often, connect early, right from the beginning with an icebreaker. One thing I recommend with an icebreaker is thinking about how to make it contextually relevant to your content, to your theme, to your audience, right? So it doesn't feel like it's dangling out here, but it actually is connected, gives people the why am I doing this? So it doesn't feel like it's just some cheesy connection activity. Then we get into basically the meat of your content, which we call the rungs on the ladder. And this is a series of exercises, workshops, or speakers that build on each other. They're sequential. So really putting your content in an order that makes sense for learners, right? So starting from the most basic or foundational content, and then slowly building towards your pinnacle. So we're on the way up the ladder. And we talk about the rungs on the ladder want to be equidistant from each other, right? So what happens when there's a big gap in the rungs and people have to reach really far is they go into the panic zone. So if you can make your rungs equidistant, then they're saying yes, and yes, I'm ready, give me more. Yes, they're willing to go with you. Whereas if there's a really big gap, that's when people are like, whoa, 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 too much, too fast. I'm not ready. I don't feel safe. And that's when people break down, leave, don't come back, all that jazz. So thinking about going gradually and incrementally. I'm seeing if people already know each other. Yes, and yes, and to all the responses in there. There's always more to learn. There's always deeper layers of psychological safety to establish. So it's up to you to find ways to engage people that are interesting and that help them learn more about each other. Great. Then we're going up to the pinnacle. The pinnacle is the experience that delivers the promised transformation of your event. Whatever your primary shift is, your from to statement, this is where you're delivering an experience that gives people that visceral sense of what we're talking about. So if your session is all about being a courageous leader, this is where you're getting them an opportunity to actually practice being courageous. Maybe it's writing a letter, scripting out or doing a role play, giving feedback to one of their direct reports that's been really challenging and there's been a rift in the relationship. So what is it that would help them take that step in being courageous? They're going to actually do it in this moment so that it's not a thought or an idea, but it's an experience they're having. That's your pinnacle. It is literally the point. It is why people are coming. And after that, you have pinnacle integration. So you have to have a moment for people to reflect. What just happened? What is the meaning of that? How are things going to be different for me, for my organization, for my clients, for my team because of that? So this is a debrief to make sure the pinnacle is felt and retained. This is part of how we have that lasting transformation, making learning stick. And at the very end, you have your closing, which is an intentional farewell to share and send everyone off on a high note. So you don't want to end with logistics, right? This is not your call to action. This is not like email me or sign up for my program or hire me again to do this for your team. This is like usually I can say like a closing is usually great if you can do it in 5 minutes or under. It could be takeaways, stop, start, continues, anything like that. What's this moment? What's the feeling that you want to leave people with? So thinking about how to seal from a feeling perspective instead of from a doing kind of head perspective. Yeah, so important to remember, don't waste an energetic closing on logistics. Yeah, you don't want to begin or end with logistics. You want to minimize logistics, throw them somewhere in the middle, and then move on. So that's a thought there. So we've gone through all these elements. And now what I'm going to ask you to do is to reflect. The design principle here is that structure is your co-facilitator. So I like to think about if you have a well-designed structure, then that structure is holding your hand through the process, and you've baked your vision, your genius, your strategy, your empathy into your design. So that is your partner as you are in the room. And this proven structure that we just shared, the dramatic arc template, it creates repeatable, scalable results that you can count on for a profound impact every time. So every time I design a program, I do it intuitively because I've done it so many times, but then I look at the dramatic arc and I'm like, oh, where am I missing pieces, or where do I need to reorder something? And there's always something that I'm like, oh yeah, I need to refine, I need to add that or move this around. And again, what I have found is that it works really well for a 1-hour workshop, a half-day training, a 6-month leadership development. It really can scale to any size group, any content, any length of program, as long as it is a shared learning experience. That's really where it's best applied. So of the elements we've just reviewed, I would love for you to think about which one is in your stretch zone, right? So there might be many in there that were in your comfort zone. Maybe there's some in your panic zone, I don't know. But think about what is one of these elements that's in your stretch zone that would create even more impact in your event design. So earlier we talked about the connection principles, 3 keys to connection: connect early, often, and gradually increase vulnerability. And you chose one that would really support your work and your audience. So now I want you to think about these elements that we just talked about in the arc. Again, you're probably doing a lot of them already, but maybe you could really embrace one even more. You might feel like, I hear from a lot of people, I really haven't been giving guidelines enough credit. I just kind of blow past them. I don't really spend a lot of time there, but now I'm seeing that could really influence my group. Or icebreakers like, I just know there's going to be resistance. People are going to roll their eyes. They're going to feel like it's cheesy. So I don't do those because it's an intact team. They already know each other, right? So maybe it's pinnacle. Maybe it's like, yeah, I've been considering a keynote as a pinnacle, and now I'm realizing I could really bring that concept more to life and have that be more experiential. So I don't know what it is for you, just sharing some ideas. I'm going to show you this slide again, and I'm going to give you a minute or two here to reflect for yourself which of these is a stretch for you and would be really impactful for you to share, focus a little bit more on in your design. And then we're going to get into some breakout groups where you're going to get a chance to share with a partner which one it is. So right now, just giving you a few moments to reflect on which one might be most impactful for you and why. And how would that support your design and the impact for your audience? All right. Hopefully something has become clear for you. Again, no right or wrong answer here, just whatever is feeling alive for you in terms of a place that would be a stretch for you that would benefit you, your design, your participants, and their experience. So we're going to head into great breakouts now. Your last breakout, you're going to be in a group of 2 again. You have about 2 minutes each, 5 minutes total. Each person will have 2 minutes to share. The other partner is actively listening. You're going to share one element of the dramatic arc that's in your stretch zone and why. How would integrating this element support your experience design? The person with the darker shirt will begin first, and you have the first minute to drop in and say hello, determine which shirt is darker. If you're both wearing black shirts, then you will have to figure it out on your own. And we're going to send an announcement when it's time to switch. So again, first minute to drop in, say hello, and then 2 minutes each to share. Again, invite you to aim for equal voice and accept non-closure when your 2 minutes are up so that we make sure each person has equal time to share. So with that, we will send you off into your breakouts, and we'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Welcome back. Yay, you're here. All right. As you are coming back, I'd love to see what are your stretch zone elements. If you would be willing to place them in the chat. What is the element that's in your stretch zone that would improve or catalyze your experience design? What is the element that you would focus on as your stretch zone? Great. Seeing pinnacles, arrival. Yes. Be more courageous with the pinnacle. Awesome, I love that. Pinnacle integration to ensure their attention. Yes, we tend to skip that and go right to the closing. Pinnacle. For a lot of people, it's pinnacle. Pinnacle is almost always one of, when we take people through our experience design course, this is the place people get really stuck and confused. And they're like, what do you do? Pinnacle. And it seems like this is like big, hairy beast. But again, probably you're already doing pinnacle and you can just turn up the volume on the experiential nature of it. And sometimes people have pinnacle already in their design, but it's one of the rungs of their ladder. Like they have to move where it is in their program, or they have to truncate. Like the shorter of a time period you have, the more specific and narrow your promise needs to be, which means you need to scale back what your pinnacle is, right? You might be, again, going too far too fast, trying to get people to a pinnacle that's not realistic for the time you have or for the transformation you're trying to achieve. Yes. Pinnacle, example of how this arc has been applied to a learning experience. To see how pinnacle works, guess what? We're going to do that in a minute. What's the difference between exercises that build on each other and the pinnacle experience? Yes. So the rungs on the ladder are those fundamental conceptual elements. So let's say let's go back to my pinnacle is courageous leadership. What are the elements that I need to establish for courageous leadership to be realized? So there's some amount of risk-taking that we need to do. There's some amount of active listening and maybe some storytelling, or what are the ways in which they're going to be a courageous leader? So do you need some empathy in order to do that? Do you need some willingness to speak the truth, whatever your truth is, to be a courageous leader, right? So think about what are the elements that lead up to your pinnacle. And your pinnacle is, like, if you were to leave the pinnacle out, people would leave your session feeling unfulfilled, feeling like, wait, there's something missing. Like we didn't get to the main meat, the main like reason why we're here. So pinnacle is the most advanced thing that you're doing. It's the most complex. It's the most risky. It's the thing that is farthest in the stretch zone for participants. Hopefully not panic, but it is as far as you're going to stretch them is where the pinnacle is. So great there. Really nice feedback. Thank you for these. Wonderful. Do you advise naming the pinnacle at the start or for the experience to unfold? I would say I probably would not name my pinnacle, because at the very beginning, if you tell them where you're going, that might seem really scary and far away. If you lead them there gradually, hopefully, again, we talked about this ladder. When they're at the top of the ladder, hopefully they should be looking down and being like, holy crap, I'm at the top of the ladder. It's amazing. I didn't even realize I was all the way up here. But if you tell them at the bottom of the ladder, we're going all the way up there, that could be really scary. So I would just say, let it unfold. Do you share an agenda in the beginning? Yes, I do share an agenda, but I leave it really broad. I try not to get too specific there. Okay, excellent. I love these questions. I want to make sure I get to the end on time. So I'm going to share with you my screen, reverse engineer today. We're going to do a little bit of takeaways before we leave. And then I'm happy to stay on the line for a couple minutes if folks have questions that we didn't get to address during the session itself. So here is what happened today. Here's how we applied this arc. So we started with our arrival. Sorry. Let us see here. I need to get over to the slides. There we are. Okay, so we started with our arrival. When you arrived, there was music playing. We were in gallery view. There was that prompt about where you are and a recent event that was memorable for you. We did our guidelines, consumer, critic, contributor, right? We invited you to be a contributor and asked you to agree. We did our icebreaker, which is our rose, thorn, and our bud. So we notice how we thematically tied that in to experience design. So it was both a personal share. It asked for some vulnerability. You got to opt into that, what layer you were willing to share. But it was about the topic that we're discussing. Then we had our rungs on the ladder. These are the elements that make the pinnacle possible. So we had to define what experience design is. We talked about the 3 pillars, which were transformation, connection, collaborative learning. We talked about the 3 event models, the flat line, the chaos, the dramatic arc, and then we did a deeper review of what the dramatic arc is. The pinnacle for today is we did these breakouts where I asked you to think about what element of the dramatic arc is in your stretch zone. So in this pinnacle, we had a breakout, we had an opportunity to connect. We asked you to share something that might be a little vulnerable, right? It's like a challenge, like what's this place where you're, even though you might be a wonderful experience designer, very successful, feel confident in what you're doing, we all have a place we can learn and grow. So this is asking you to say, a lot of you said coming on here, I want to learn and grow, I want to improve my skill set, I want to learn something new. So here's where we're asking you to select what is that thing that might really expand your palette as an experienced designer. In our pinnacle integration, we just had that stretch zone debrief. So I asked you to put what was the stretch zone that you put in your debriefs, in your breakouts. We put that in the chat. Cumulative integration, I didn't talk about per se, but cumulative integration is being at the top of the ladder, looking back at the entire session and doing some integration there, some debriefing. We're doing that right now. So this is the cumulative integration of our whole session. You have your call to action. This is what is the thing that you want people to do, often deepening the learning. What is the next steps they can take to connect to the community? And then we do a final reflection and closing. We talked about sending people out on a high note. That's going to be our biggest takeaway from today, which we'll get to in just a moment. So that is the arc as applied to this session as you have experienced it. We have a lot of learning options for you to continue what we have done today. These are all free resources that are accessible on our website. I'm going to drop it into the chat here, and we'll send this out as a follow-up as well, all of these links. So there's a guide to applying the dramatic arc. We have 100 icebreaker questions that we've compiled from folks like you who have taken our programs. We have the 5 keys to connection video series. I went over 3 keys today. There's 2 more keys, secret keys you can find out. And then if you want to stay in touch with me personally, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can converse there. So those are some cool resources. And I'd love to hear from you in our last few moments together. If you can summarize in the chat a word or a phrase that encapsulates your main takeaway from today. Maybe it's connect early, connect often. Maybe it's sage on the stage or wisdom is in the room. What's something that really stood out to you today that feels powerful, that feels potent, that you want to like put in your back pocket and be like, yes, that is the thing that I want to remember. Maybe it's the concept of pinnacles. Maybe that integration or debrief is a great way to have content and connection. So just some ideas there that might be alive for you. What are the things that you're taking away from today that are most powerful for you? Framework for orientation. Be specific about the transformation. Yes, I can still create worlds and experiences following my intuition. Strategies, your co-facilitator. the concept of the pinnacle. Yes, integration, pushing the mold for what is possible in the pinnacle, trying the icebreaker to the main theme and pinnacle. Yes, these are beautiful. Yes, what else are you experiencing here? Main takeaways from today. Yes, pure connection on shakers. Yes, amazing humans, walking the walk. Thank you for demonstrating and debriefing. Yes, so we always try to do everything as a meta experience, right? We're teaching it by modeling it, which is always the most powerful way that you can share. Yes, always and pinnacles. Beautiful. Thank you so much. So thank you again for coming today. Feel free to stick around. If you have questions about the content that we didn't get to address, happy to chat with you, or if you just want to connect and hang out. I want to wish you really good luck on your experience design journey. I hope you got something meaningful that you can integrate into what you're doing today. Whoops. And I would like to do our final moment of closing. As I said, closing is a way you send people out on a high note, and it's a feeling. So I just want to invite you to bring yourself off mute and bring your hands up to the sides of your screen. And this only works if everyone does it. So we're going to do a hoot and holler and a collective round of collaborative applause to end our session. So here we go. Woohoo! You did it.
Yay!
Good job. Good job. This is one of
Yeah.
my favorite ways to end a virtual session. So it's a really sweet moment to connect. Again, you're sending people out on that takeaways and high note. What is the feeling that you want to leave people with? And now I'm going to pass it back to Valeria for just a little bit of logistics. We were talking about this in the breakout. But anyway, we are going to give you some logistics. But thank you all so much for coming. And yeah, feel free to stick around for some quick announcements. And if you want to ask any questions or talk, I'm happy to stay on.
Jenny, I already moved to the call to action, and I'm not going to waste that energy closing on logistics. So all the updates LinkedIn page. So thank you all for joining. Jenny, you are awesome.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you
Thanks
all.
for taking time on your Thursday to be with us.